and my night's closing in. I'm standing here all alone, trying to figure out why life seems so unfair. 'Cause this world is too heavy for one man to hold. I'm feeling like I'm spinning out of control. Where would I go? Who would I turn to? Tell me if I didn't have you, whose name would I call? When I need to escape, you're my hiding place. You're my shelter from despair. Without you, I haven't got a prayer. There have been times when everything I touch seemed like it turned to gold. Started believing now I can make it all on my own. But I see fortunes fade away and turn to dust. And there's one thing I've learned, it's in God I will trust. Where would I go? Who would I turn to? Tell me if I didn't have you, whose name would I call? When I need to escape, you're my hiding place. You're my shelter from despair. Without you, I haven't got a prayer. When I need to escape, you're my hiding place. You're my shelter from despair. Without you, I haven't got a prayer. I haven't got a prayer. I haven't got a prayer. I haven't got a prayer.
Good evening to you, wherever you're viewing from around the world, from Jamaica, the capital of the world, or from the beautiful other islands in our wonderful Caribbean, or from the neighbors to the north, whether you're from north, south, east, and west. This is our unrehearsed practical conversation, Men on Mondays. Trust you had a great Monday so far. Trust you had a great weekend. And I trust that today was all that you planned. But even if it wasn't, we hope that your conviction that God will make a way will at least enable you to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. And I'd like to welcome you to our conversation. And with me this evening, we have joining us on Zoom, the one and only Dennis Ezekiel Augustus Samuels. He called me Amos. I call him Amos. And on set live and in living colors with me on set is Sean and Wayne. And we were together last week. We're going to be praying and we'll get right on into it. Dennis, can you pray for us as we get started?
For another beautiful day, we give you thanks for the opportunity to share. And as we share the realities about a man's life, may somebody be inspired tonight. May somebody be empowered. We ask you that the Spirit of the living God may lead us in a path of righteousness. May this discussion be one that will bring vital insights into how to live our lives, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. We know the Lord heard the prayer even if we couldn't hear it, but the guys in the tech room will connect the sound. There's a little technical challenge there, but online I want to welcome, Wayne and Deshaun. I see more female online than male, but I want to shout out, there is Everett and a number of our brothers there, but share the link, send the word out. It is Men on Mondays, and it's time for the electrifying conversation. Last week, now tongue twisting meaning I haven't had a dumpling since morning. Last week we ended, and I asked you to come prepared and share with me this evening, what is the king's meat for you? So last week we looked at Daniel 1 and that verse in the first chapter, that Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's meat. And we looked at the issue of putting your privileges above your principles, and that the king's meat is any privilege that the society and this world of our fleshly desires, our carnal nature, seeks to have as the preeminent guiding principle. So the king's meat in the conversation, for the purpose of the conversation, is anything that goes against your settled God-given conviction. Some things may not be sinful, but they may not be the best thing for you. So that, let's say, in Jamaica, we drive on the left. Now you see a man coming down on his right, which is your left, and he has no intention of moving. Now the law says you are right in staying on the left, but you know you may be dead right if you stay on the left. So there comes a time when there needs to be a practical shift, a sensible shift from the king's meat. Welcome to the conversation. And so welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Pastor Samuels.
Good to have you. Hope you had a great Monday so far.
It's been beautiful.
Wonderful. Welcome, Sir Wayne.
A pleasure being here, a pleasure.
It is a joy, and I see a call coming in, and I don't know, she is in a part of the U.S. where the timeline is not our timeline, and I just answered her, she jumped off with a smile. That's my daughter, that's my princess, all the way in Arizona. And so we want to pick up where we left off last week. But I brought with me a little book entitled Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at the Table. And Louis Giglio, it's one of my, I'm developing a love for his writings. And the book, Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at the Table. So men, as we talk this evening, and we may reflect on the title of the book, and at the table here, in my interpretation, is the seat of your mind, where decisions are made. And we like to root our conversation in the Bible. So a text such as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if you allow negative thoughts and bad influence and bad attitude to sit at the table, you are letting the enemy in. Give me your thoughts on the title. Don't give the enemy a seat at the table. Now you can talk not like an old man like myself. What does it mean to you as a young man with breast milk still on the corner of his mouth?
Well, you don't necessarily want to be in a position where it's uncompromising or it's compromising. However, you really want to be practical and understand that my witness personally can be damaged by just taking our eyes off Christ. We understood from even Peter's example. He was in the presence of Christ. He knew that he could have been protected by God. But when Jesus was almost overcame by the enemies in the Garden of Gethsemane, he quickly drew his sword. So that's giving into passion, that's giving into impulse, and we have to be careful of that as men, because our egos can cost us so much in so little time.
Our egos can cost us so much in so little time. And many men get into sexual temptations because a woman dare them and challenge them. And the ego, the macho stuff in us. So what would it mean to you if a nice chick said, Sean, you're a chicken, man?
You have got to take that one with a heavy heart. Yeah, because, I mean...
No man wants to be called a chicken. You don't want to run...
But realistically, if you do the background check, I know, say, this is her character. Or she teases people, or she draws people into that type of infidelity, but doesn't necessarily give into it. So she's basically setting you up to say, see, you're not as strong as you think you are.
Okay. As a man thinks in his heart. Dennis, what does the title of Giggler's book say to you? Don't give the enemy a seat at your table.
One of the things we
if you turn up your microphone for me, in the context of this conversation, Men on Mondays, in the context of not giving in to the king's meat, not yielding to the carnal nature, the sexual temptations, the temptation for liquor. It may not be sex, it can be music, and it can just be anything that is against the conviction that you have in developing what for you means a total man. What does this issue of giving the enemy a seat at the table against the backdrop of our text? As a man thinks in his heart, so is he.
Yeah, so it's always a battle for a man, because as men, you're hearing me?
Yes, the guys are coming to the board, so go ahead.
As men, we're stimulated visually. So one of the real challenges is to develop the discipline to manage your eyes and to manage your desires. Because quite often, some of the things the eyes want to look at and the desires want, they are not necessarily the best thing for one's Christian faith, one Christian belief. So one of the things you have to do is to learn to look away, or learn to keep a straight gaze, stay in open spaces, avoid one-on-one situation with a woman.
Okay, so while you share those thoughts, Riley said, don't give the devil any access point. I love that, Riley. Don't give the devil any access point. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, so if you stay in the open, I know that people are having intimacy in the open, but I won't have intimacy in the open. So if you stay in open spaces, that's one way of not giving the devil a seat at the table. If you avoid close getting into a woman's space, and you know that every human being has a space. If you go within 3 feet, you're in somebody's space. If you avoid that closeness and avoid touches, then you can stay clear. You can stay clear, and you would not give the devil a seat. And you avoid one-on-one. Water is another one. When you go to the beach, avoid contact with the female. Because sometimes we just think that, and avoid females sitting down in your lap also.
You know, you talk about going to the beach. When we were, I'm going back to Burnside, so all of us were youngsters, and Bluefields Beach was where we used to go to have fun. We were teenagers, you know, in our late teens and stuff, and you know that you don't get a chance to, and so our elder is dead, and he would come, and of course he would be surveying the waters, and He came back and we were at church and he was saying that he saw missionary contacts being made. He saw missionary contacts.
Water has high connectivity.
Because hands were touching where they shouldn't touch, and he called it missionary contact. And listen, we're having real conversation. Young people.
If you do that, you get into trouble.
We were young men in our teens, and of course we were exploring. And even though
you get into trouble.
Even though we were in a group, you were stealing a touch where you should, and your hands sometimes creative accidental touch. And but the reality is that it's not just sexual issues, because that may not be. Here's somebody who has a weakness for liquor, for alcohol, and it doesn't have to be teenagers either. We're talking about men on Mondays. We're talking about being the best version of yourself. Wayne, let's pick up on this. So it's not just sexual issues.
Before you go to Wayne, I could tell you one of the great challenges I'm having currently. Mm-hmm. I'm a JP, and quite often the people who come to me with the forms
are not
I've
people
never seen them. Genuinely, sometimes I feel like I'd fling out with the seal because they're genuinely in need. But what is there? You have to lie.
Okay, there you go.
It is either you're really hard or you're gonna lie, and it happens daily. And sometimes you do it. The Spirit says, "There you go again." You know this man? You say you know. You don't know the man.
And you talk about lie and the king's meat. There's a certain king, though not wearing the crown of a king. They say he lie in the morning, lie in the day, and lie in the evening. And he tells lies with such consummate ease that a nation believes him. I'm not calling anybody's name. I'm just saying,
Yes.
I just talk about, but that's the issue. And there are persons, there are men who will come and offer you money to stamp a document or to sign a document, knowing that what the document is saying is what you can sign to. And the real truth is that there are persons with the authority who they do go along the king's meat in signing those documents. So I was throwing something in Wayne's corner.
Alberga Foster once said to me that it is called the devil's triangle. He says it's the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes,
the pride of life.
And the pride of life. So while some persons are influenced by the lust of the flesh, and others by the lust of the eyes, and others by the pride of life, we must take a serious position on it to say that I'm going to make a decision that will reflect that I know God. Here is something that is true. When you read the script well, you learn that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Mm-hmm. So everybody has an appetite for something that's on the king's table.
Correct.
And sometimes when we would have gotten to a place in our Christian experience where we overcome a specific thing, we judge and deal hard with the person who still has an appetite for it. But we ourselves will find ourselves with appetite for some other delicacy on the king's table.
Which may not be the delicacy that the other person we are condemning have
not at all.
For.
And sometimes we have just graduated from what they're suffering from.
Talk to me. And
know that we have been in a higher form, or know that we are at the tertiary level. Mm-hmm. And the primary stuff don't bother us anymore.
We're not allowing the primary student to grow up.
And sometimes we're still bothered by the primary stuff, but we've learned how to handle it in public. And so because we can look like we are right, because we can look through our glasses and they don't see that we're steering, we behave as the one who turned their heads is at fault. Let me say something to you. Jesus was trying to put the Pharisees in their rightful place. Not embarrassingly, but putting them in their rightful place. And he says, look here, not just the man who touches a woman sin, but the one who conceives it in his head, in his heart. And that is why I'm going to love what Jesse, what the prophet said to Jesse. He says, Man looketh on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart.
But last week, Deshaun, in his practical dialogue, said that, listen, in his youthful days, you already take off the clothes with your mind and stuff like that. And the truth is that some persons who are hard on some of the young men is only because they can't manage anymore.
Oh, mercy. And even so, we find David calling for the lady down the road he saw bathing. But that is a power move. What if anybody could have done it? You see, that is why only God can be the true and righteous judge.
Say it again.
Because God knows what the audio and the video playing in your heart really is saying.
So, and many times he would say, listen, man, the Bible said, and he said, why are you saying this in your mind? Why are you thinking this stuff?
Yes.
So back to your statement on the audio and the video.
Yes. Because some things are not audible, so you don't know that the person is thinking it. But the God who knows all things, according to Nehemiah, he writes it in a book. And so what our celebration, our point of reference is always Jesus. You will have difficulties. You will go to the king's table and find interest in some delicacy or the other. But you must learn to put your trust in God.
Listen, and I want to say that God for us is not a God for just church people. And there may be a youngster, Deshaun, or a middle-aged man or a businessman listening and say, boy, God knows it's. I was in South America some years ago.
Yes.
And toward the very closing weekend, a short program, a young man who I didn't even know he was parked out at the road every evening. And this night in question, he asked if I could talk with me. He said, man, you make God seem as if I could touch him. Oh, the long and short of the conversation is that this youngster had Colombian guys Colombian policemen piloting his drugs across the waters. Him say him not do drugs, but him own the stuff. And him asked me, boy, him say, listen, man, you make God sound like him concerned about people like me too. The long and short of it is that I walked out into Colombian water and baptized that young millionaire who all he knew was drugs and stuff. And he had persons, and here it is, he had persons who was eating at the king's meat because all they were getting, they had the law on their side and they were charging him to do this stuff that the law shouldn't be doing. The issue is that this issue of men and money is looking at the practical downfall that all of us, and so God is not just for church folk.
No, not at all.
And we talk about how we can rise above some stuff. And I want to challenge a youngster out there listening right now. If you ever take the time to read this book we call the Bible, I dare you to read it consistently and not be changed. Because inherent in the book itself, inherent in the Bible, is the power to transform. Because it's God's book. There is something at work when you read the Bible. And if you don't believe me, just start reading it for yourself.
The Bible, Pastor, the Bible is such a book of not just, it's a book of interest. The Bible helps us understand that while God pays so much attention to Abraham, the priest, and he pays attention to all the sophisticated levels of church people, we still find him handling prostitutes and handling drunkards and handling people who have strayed from church. God is for everybody.
Luke
God,
15 said the problem, Sean, that the scribes and Pharisees had with Jesus. They said, boy, him can't be the Messiah. The text literally said, this man receiveth sinners and eat with them.
Oh, mercy. This is God that we're introducing.
And talk to me. Have you ever found some church folk who don't like that kind of Jesus who receives sinners?
Yeah, because you have them thinking that they don't understand the contrast between composure and compassion. That consequence is there either way. For me to be so composed in my Christianity that, I know the scriptures, I know the laws, I know I'm not supposed to do that, I'm not supposed to go here, I'm not supposed to mingle with these people. But really and truly, you have an uncle like that who used to smoke and drink or Senegal shop. You have a grandmother who used to have more than one child, you understand how you have some more than one relatives. And you start to saying, you love your grandmother dearly, but as you grow, you start to confess to yourself, so, wow, grandma, you have a little problem.
Grandma never so saintly.
You understand? And that is where you have to challenge yourself now. Instead of being composed, you start to be compassionate about it.
Yes.
And be like, I see you not as grandma, but I see you as an individual who has her own issues that may not have had the upbringing with the understanding that I may have.
Yes.
And as a result of that, I may want to so-called break the generational curse by even trying to have a conversation with you that nobody has had, or even as open as a grandma. I don't really want to say, you used to stay saying, but you know, I find myself linger certain place and I have certain conversation with certain people. And sometimes I feel like I don't have nobody to turn to. And don't think I disrespect you, but I notice some things and I think, based on what I see, I can come to you, I can talk to you, I can open up. And that is where the difference between the youth and the elders can be seen some of the time. Because for an elder to be married for 20 odd years, having a nice family, he is trying to keep the image of the elder, the composed person who knows the scriptures, who knows the hymns. But him now go turn to you and tell us, yo, Sister Marcia passed him last week, and you have to steer in a way in face to make sure, say, turn your head and look past
sing
Sister Marcia.
Rock of Ages cleft for me.
You understand? And that is where the youth see those things.
Every day.
The slight comments, the little shift that you look, and they say, watch him. Go and like in stay so, And in my own situation, as we were supposed to touch on last week, my prayer, funny enough, that would have been the darkest prayer I've ever prayed. And I asked God to take my life 365 days for 1 year.
You mean you were having those thoughts for a whole year?
For an entire year.
What was happening to you during the period?
It was just a misunderstanding of what was happening in my my environment, whether it was family, whether it was in a public space where I couldn't really resonate with people because I was told I'm a Christian, but yet I'm expected to mix and mingle with these people on a daily basis at school, in leisure time, when I go out and minister, going to the beach. These are the people I'm supposed to be having conversation or socializing with. Yet I'm supposed to keep myself to a particular standard. And I almost felt weird because 99% of the world is Sunday. And I am a little speck of Saturday. And yet I am supposed to have very close relations with these people. And in doing so, I drifted here and there. But the fun part about that prayer is when this Sabbath, I actually had the pleasure of sharing that testimony at church.
Well, no, boss. You're talking about the fun part. When him say the fun part about the prayer, when him asking God to take his life. So we want to find out, Sean, what's the fun part? We're going to delve into that because what could be a fun part of a suicidal contemplation?
All right, and let me show you. I asked God to take my life because I didn't feel worthy enough.
You never felt that you were accepted.
Fine.
Because we know that you have a loving mother and a loving father.
True. My parents are wonderful. Yes.
But you're saying that even in a loving circle, one can feel unloved. Not that the ones who are around you don't love you, but that your perception
of
is
how things
playing
are.
a pretty... Yes.
Exactly. And that is where you will have to be very conscious of your interpretation of what you're feeling, right? And the fun part, as I said, imagine I asked God to take my life because I did not feel worthy. Yet 16 years later, I am in youth leadership. I am actually here on this platform, having a conversation openly. And to see God actually taking my life and transforming it into a life of service.
Wow, you just said something So you, for a year, you were asking God to take your life.
Yes.
Now you just made a statement in the last couple of seconds that to see that God take your life. So let me ask you now, there are two different concepts with the taking of life.
Exactly.
We're going to go to a piece of music, but as soon as they find it, now I am interpreting the first asking God to take your life as it means the whole matter of God may not want to live.
True.
Now we can pause right at that point and go to a piece of music, and we'll come back to this conversation.
Sure.
Don't go anywhere. Wow, wow. I tell you, that's my friend. And he masters the art. He masters the art of playing the saxophone. And I want to thank Howard again and again for sharing his gifts and talents. Now, Deshaun, I have had to counsel with both male and females, teenagers in their 20s, who the first part of the prayer, God take my life. As a matter of fact, right here, I've had sessions in the room at the back with young ladies who showed me where they're slitting their, cutting themselves. Tell me, for a year, you struggled privately with that. Because it's not just you pray the prayer for 1 week or 3 months. So when you get to the first 6 months of the prayer, what was it that propelled you to continue to say, Lord, take my life?
The reason why I continued to pray in that manner, I think it was me genuinely being vulnerable with God. Mm-hmm. And I was so annoyed with how sinful things were, not in my own life, but you're asking me as a teen to stand like the brave. Mm-hmm. In a case where
you don't feel you have the strength. You don't feel
none.
Or the desire.
And that's where the concept and the text of the heart is wicked and deceitful above all things.
Jeremiah 17 verse 9.
Who can know it? Mm-hmm. God knew my heart.
Wow.
And genuinely, I think that was a time where I just started to embrace. It was a bit of rebellion, and here is where the rebellion, I said it earlier about the fun part. In having that conviction to pray that prayer, I started to challenge the things I was thinking about, and I started to, as the year went on, I realized I started to, my mindset elevated. I started to be stronger in how I face things. I started to be more of a witness. I started to be more rebellious towards peers who are trying to share certain things. And I say, oh, I don't need that.
So you started being rebellious against the peers who were steering you in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
What turned the tide? Before you answer me that question, let me come to Wayne. Wayne, some folk would say, boy, once you have a good job and you have money, then things set. You're a successful businessman, and you've been around persons with multiple figures on a monthly basis. But have you ever come across depressed businessmen or men with suicidal ideation, businessmen, successful businessmen?
You know, I'm really appreciative of the fact that you asked that question, that it genuinely touched somewhere. Because typically what people does when they come across people who handles money of certain magnitude is start painting the picture, the fool and his money shall part, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's always a negative connotation that encapsulate persons who seem to be a bit more off than the typical. But if you ever know the problem that is associated with persons who manage large portfolios, persons who handle large amount and the risk associated with it, is that sometimes you sleep better than them. Sometimes it is...
You mean sometimes the poor man sleep better than the rich man?
Long time better. You see, here is the thing. One friend said to me, he says he went to a friend's yard and they were sharing something with him. And he said he noticed that they had about 12 mongrel there, but he only have one big German shepherd, so they had more dogs than him, and they're complaining that they're poor. No, here is the thing. The poor man has neighbor. The rich man have security, but the poor man has neighbor. Now, let me put that into some real terms and help you with it now. Persons who handles large portfolio need Jesus just the same.
Wow.
There is no barrier. Money doesn't give comfort. It doesn't give defense.
Solomon said it in Ecclesiastes. I mean, the first 3 chapters. That's why I'm saying, boy, vanity of vanities.
Say the preacher.
And in the context of being real, raw, and Solomon had more sex that he could handle, more women. He had music. He had money. He had all of the stuff. He had ships taking gold, and at the end of it, Him say, boy, it's not worth it.
No, it's not worth it. And if you want to be mathematical about it, which is fun, Solomon only had 360 days in the calendar year, just the same, but he had 1,000 women. It means there was no way he would have seen one every night if he changed it for the whole year. He would have gone almost 3 years. So it's not just the resources that are around you. The emptiness that echoes in your in the vacuum of your full bank account when you don't have Jesus.
You just said something a while ago that. So how can a man be empty when he have so much money? What kind of emptiness you talk about? Him have money, him have big house, him have 2-3 cars. What about emptiness? What do you mean him empty?
The scariest thing is to go home to a large house and know Jesus.
Wow.
It hurts. And these persons wouldn't mind somebody coming over and sharing Jesus with them.
Now I have had to, so I sat one evening with 2 business persons, a male and a female. I'm in the middle. The 2 of them have licensed gun. The 2 of them have licensed firearm. I'm sitting in the middle, caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. And so it is not even that the house is empty, but there's no relationship. They have, now, you see why I want Dennis in here, because I forget to Dennis online, Dennis, you see why you need to be on set, because boy, me forget one point, so you're over the other side, because, so Dennis talk to me. Now, here it is, the way inside the man is empty. Him have figures in the bank, and him have a huge house, and the fridge, and not just one fridge him have deep freezed 2, 3, 4, and it's stocked with T-bone steak, veggie steak, all kind of steak. But then he's empty, because I want someone to understand that you can have money, you can have a woman in the house, but if there is no trust in the relationship, if there is no conversation, if there is no mutual respect and sharing, the house is full, but your heart is empty. And Wayne says that emptiness sometimes echo and drive men crazy to the point where, though they have money, they become suicidal. You're a successful businessman. Talk to me about that. Yeah, not that I think that you ever know what emptiness is.
Hey, so let me share a few things. One need to understand that you don't overcome temptation without submission to God.
Amen.
And you by submitting to God and His Word and to a system of belief, you develop the capacity to resist. But temptation doesn't go away. So sometimes people think that the unmarried person has temptation, but the married person have no temptation. Not true. And temptation truly don't reside unless it is defeated or unless it is subdued. So we admitting temptation to come into us. What it does, it emboldens itself and it becomes harder to resist. But if we submit ourselves to God and His Word and develop that consistency of resisting, then we develop the capacity, a better capacity to manage our emotions, to manage our distractions, to manage our evil thoughts, and we will become stronger. That's one. Bob Marley says that if his life is just for himself, then his life doesn't worth anything. The smart people with money have come to recognize that when you have a certain amount of money, there's so much you can do with it and no more if you're going to spend it on yourself. If you start finding good, solid means of spending the money that is not necessarily spending that money on yourself, you experience a higher level of satisfaction. You feel better about yourself.
Now somebody, while you share that, so Hazel said, money is just a resource to pay for goods and services, and you can get comfort from having it. However, it can't tell you I love you. The money can't tell you I love you. It can't give you a cup of water, and it can't wish you a good day. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, but it can buy you the water, and it can access to the services. But what you don't want to do, my father, yes, I go back to my father. He says money makes a good servant,
But a bad master.
but a bad master. So the smart people who have money don't allow money to master them. They allow money to become a servant that serves worthy cause, and they experience a higher level of fulfillment.
Yeah,
and they experience a higher level of respect. One of the things that men desires most. So most men, if he has his pocket full of money and he has no respect, he's not fulfilled.
Yeah, because there are some persons, Dennis, who they have money but they don't have any respect because of how they get it, and there's some people who would never respect them because of the perception as to how they acquire their wealth, and or also even if they acquire it by just and wholesome means, but their attitude to others, their lack of compassion and kindness. Now, I was segueing from the Sean statement about asking God to take his life. We haven't come to the part when God literally take it, but not in the context of how he was praying it. But I've seen part of the struggle that I'd like some people to understand. Solomon said it's a bubble that bursts because of the fact that you can lose it in a matter of days. A wrong investment can cause you to lose it. When hurricane, whichever one it does now, when Cayman was blanketed, Hurricane Ivan, multi-millionaires were standing in line waiting for a cup of hot soup. They had the money in the bank, but they couldn't get to it. They have their credit card, but they couldn't use it. And in many cases, they couldn't even sleep in the bed because it was flooded. This is the issue with riches and the king's stuff Wayne said, without Christ. And I want to come back to Sean, because maybe there's somebody watching asking God to take your life. Maybe you are a business person or somebody who wants to start a business, or a youngster, and life has been challenging. But by the way, there is nothing down here that's worth killing yourself for.
Absolutely nothing.
There's nothing in this life that's worth taking your life for. So, Sean, let me come back to you. So we're going back, Dennis, to the Sean's prayer. Not the way the Lord answered it, but the way he was praying it. So you got to the point where you began resisting, even though they were your friends, but you now discover a perception that they were encouraging you in the wrong direction. Were there other positive youngsters that at the point you were praying, they were providing some good support?
Always. And that's another thing. So the concept of iron sharpening iron is very important in regards to your Christian walk.
Now, somebody watching you from Canada and the US don't understand what iron sharpened iron means. So talk to me.
All right. If you want to get more practical about iron sharpening iron, it's a relationship that you have with others, especially in the positive sense, spiritual sense of the foundational aspects of them praying for you when you don't want to speak. Somebody just singing a song, and you're like, you know, somebody never hear that before? And they said, really? And you know, say it's my favorite song, my mom taught it to me. And you start to think of the relationship of how they were groomed. My mother in particular taught me my favorite Bible verse, which is 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. I think I shared it last week, when I said that, for God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. It's odd to think of somebody with a sound mind praying for God to take their life.
Now, it's hard to think of somebody with a sound mind
asking God to take their life. However, I think the resistance that I was showing to my peers at that time was God working on me. Yes, I was still in between what my pleasures and my purpose. Because you're young, you feel like, all right, you have a time now, you're going to run up and down, you're going to have some friends, you're going to go to these places, you go to these parties. And you're thinking to yourself that you're having the time of your life. Until you realize, or if you're in the scenario where you at a young age, you start to lose friends who are doing the same thing that you are doing, and you see the despair that their family is in, and you consider that you can never, ever encourage them out of that sin, that is sealed, that's done, and you start to self-reflect on, I could have me. It could have been me. And then you are face to face with the concept that Satan brought to Eve. You will not surely die.
Or you will be like God. You will get a higher life.
Exactly.
Because the king's meat is always with a temptation to say, listen, you can be better than you are in the wrong direction. I see Dennis dying with laughter on the other side, and I don't want to forget you like I did the first time.
One of the things that I want to reiterate, we cannot overcome unless we commit to put good decisions back to back. They have what is called a muscle memory. When you practice the thing over and over, after a while it becomes embedded into the neurons, and you develop the capacity to repeat the action, even under pressure. So we have just finished Boys Champ, the man who practices the 100 and to run hard at the start, go into his drive phase and then hold his form, even under pressure, because he repeats that action over and over, systematically. It takes place. So we will not win unless we develop the capacity to put back-to-back decisions together and get comfortable doing it. And when we do it sometime and we don't do it, then the body goes back to the weak side. We need to find a way to try over and over to repeat the action enough that it can be embedded in our memories, can develop the capacity.
Okay.
Think about life is Pastor. The life not giving you a second test if you don't pass the first test,
Life won't give you a second test if you don't pass the first one. In other words, life won't promote you. Life won't promote you from grade 1 to grade 2 unless you handle grade 1 stuff. And sometimes God, in His own mercy, allows you to be confronted by some stuff, and in the process you build. It's like you can't have sturdy muscles unless you put tension against them or you push against them. And the same. So Wayne, I'm coming back to you. So Deshaun prayed, take my life. Yes. And I want to say to Deshaun that even in church, I think that when Elijah said, Lord, take my life, I am not worthier than the prophet, I believe he was facing some depression.
Yes. Here is the thing. There are some things that does not wait to identify your religious background, your ethnicity, your gender, your age, your complexion. Things like life and death. It doesn't matter what you are, who you are. Hunger, thirst. Those things are natural. They are innate. And so even children of God sometimes suffers hard situation. One of the problem I have when I was growing up, and I hear my sons complain about it now, is the matter of the pretense in church. Okay. People acting like everything is always okay. Everything cannot always be okay. You're having family life discussions, and you have a couple there, and the couple is supposed to talk about things in their relation, and it is so perfect. Utopia has nothing on it.
Listen, I was at discussing with some young people, and they have a couple. The couple, I think they were celebrating their 59th anniversary, meaning 59 years of the married. Yes. And they were sharing, and so they said they never had a quarrel, never had a fuss. So one young man said, Pastor, I had one blind and the other one deaf.
Exactly. There is just no way. And so
we can afford to be real.
Yeah.
We can afford to be real.
To be vulnerable.
I tell people, listen, I will tell the world, I am the most miserable human being. I think if you don't believe me, ask my wife.
You see, and the more you expose the reality, is the more the person's on the outside or the person who is looking on you say, but if you can go through that too, that means I can make it.
And not only that, and young people feel that, boy, here is somebody I can talk with. Because that person sound like him understand. And church folk, they do more harm to younger church folk when we pretend to be perfect and as if we've never had any challenge with sex or any challenge with cursing or any challenge with temper or any challenge with temptation. Listen, people, our young people struggling, they want to know that there are real people in church that they can talk with. I didn't mean to take it over from you. So when Elijah said, Lord, take my life, in my mind, him just got a threat from Jezebel. Him run, and him tired. Him exhausted. Him not have no energy left. And maybe, men, you need to understand this, that when you are so stressed and exhausted, take some time and rest. Sleep. And that's what we come back to the matter of finding a doctor. Find somebody you can talk with. Rest, man.
Yes, and one of the things that works
but
is an
account. If my wife is watching, I say, but Sammy, when you rest, listen. So I'm talking that I come to points where I said, listen, boy, me a lockdown here, sir. Me shut off. Because listen, life will stop you.
Yes.
And I believe that Elijah, having run before, the brother ran before Ahab's chariot, you know. And you ever see the thing, when the Lord found him in the cave and him hiding and stuff and him call him out, it's amazing that here is Deshaun's prayer earlier, God take my life. The Lord took his life, but not in the way, and somebody said, take my life and let it be consecrated. What did God say to Elijah? He never said, man, ashamed of you. You just finished Mount Carmel. How you get here, sir? Boy, I can't bother with you. The Lord said, listen, all right, go anoint Jehu, go anoint this one, and come. God gave him
outside your own zone.
Yes, man. God gave him another assignment. So I'm saying to somebody, you may be watching us and participating or sitting by yourself. You may not even type in the chat, but you're sitting down and you're at a point, a breaking point. God will never abandon you because you get to a point where you feel distressed and depressed. Even right now, if you feel suicidal, God not going to abandon you. Because if Judas had knelt at the foot of the tree, the same tree that him got to and climb and hang himself, before him climb the tree, if he had knelt at the root of the tree, God would have showed him mercy just like he gave Peter.
Exactly.
And in my mind, at 3 times Peter said, I don't know him. And the lady said, listen, man, you sound like you want to sound. I don't know him a breadfruit tree. I mean, I don't think that's what he said, but I'm just saying that I think Peter knew the words. So she ain't looking at me laughing. She ain't don't know Jamaican bad words. But listen, there are times when temptations come, and I'm saying to somebody, the fact that you fail, the fact that you feel depressed, and the fact that you may, even at this point, feel suicidal, I dare you to take the time to rest and read the Word. The same Bible. Go ahead, Dennis.
I'll make a point, because quite often as men, if we have experienced loss, we figure that we have lost our value. Or if our lady friend leave us, we figure that we have lost our value. But our value is not in what we have or necessarily who loves us, but who we are. And one of the things we do best, if we can navigate better, if we detach ourselves from the material stuff, to find our true value. Our true value is our inner thoughts and our outward actions, and how best we live in alignment with our professions. And in our quiet moments, if we live in alignment or what we profess, we feel better about ourselves, and we will make better quality inputs. If we just find our value in what people think of us, what car we drive, what money we have, where we work, then when those things go awry, then we become bewildered. I've experienced great loss where I lost hundreds of millions, and I still bounce back and still find purpose, still find meaning, still find happiness. And as men, that's one of the things we need.
So in other words, then, we need an anchor beyond our material stuff. We need a rock to stand on, beyond things, beyond the possession of material substance. And we're not saying that you shouldn't have material substance. Nicodemus was a wealthy fellow. So was Joseph of Arimathea. So Jesus had some wealthy guys following him because they helped to fund the mission. And he had some wealthy women as well following him. The truth is that it is not money that is evil. It is the love of money that becomes the root of all evil. It is when we misplace our values. Now, Sean, so here it was, and I want, boy, the time is gone, and the guys want to go home from and my producer, her husband sits there and says he wants to go home and have his hug up time. So we're going to steal 5 more minutes from them. Listen now. So here it is, from a negative perspective of God take my life. Here you are. You don't feel bad sometimes when you're telling folk where you were as against where you are?
No, because I'm not there anymore.
Wonderful. Because that's the point. Some folk feel that if I share where I was, it's going to devalue the currency of where I am.
Oh.
I can look and identify people who are either there or have been there. And I'm not saying it as may I look to see the speck of dirt on another individual. Okay. I'm simply saying that because of where I was, and I can identify with a man in the world who has his own issues. And you grow to have some emotional intelligence when you deal with people long enough. I can see where somebody is falling or failing or even having a hard time, and I can say, oh, I'm there. You feel all right.
So in other words, you're able to spot where somebody is at.
Exactly.
Because you have walked either close there or there. And you talked about it helps you to develop emotional intelligence.
Yes.
You've become more compassionate, more sympathetic. You are able now to see what you would normally look at but don't see it.
Yeah, because you start to identify your own triggers and people's traumas. So where other people can say, oh, that's a red flag for me and I would not tolerate that. Genuinely, that can be a personal boundary for that person in regards to be a defense mechanism. That's a trauma response. Mm-hmm. And in our culture of Jamaicans, we don't really get to talk about that enough. The trauma response of men being tough, I have it figured out. I don't have the time to feel this at the moment. The mission is not yet accomplished. I have people to provide for. I have things to do. I have places to go. And as a president, and we know your schedule at times, you feel like the mission must go on regardless of what's happening in your personal life. And because of that, you start to identify people's traumas. And if you're honest enough or transparent enough, you can become a safe haven for them just to share a word, maybe a song you were singing. I remember 2 months ago, I had a terrible toothache. A wisdom tooth. Haven't got the chance to pull it as yet.
That's why you're still wise.
You know. And I was at the clinic, and I had the great controversy with me. I realized I'm going to go to a clinic, so I decided I must have something for read, because I'm not going to get no time for rush and be attended to. And I realized that an old lady sat and turned and looked at me and had a smirk on her face. And I smiled and I said, yes, it's that book. And because of that, you can be a practical witness by just being yourself, being and having that transformative relationship with God. It's not so more as I have to act in a way that gets me seen. But the genuine things that you do that people identify with, if you're not a Christian, he might try to change. Mm-hmm. You understand? So it's not a case where I expect to be seen as a Christian all the time, but somebody seeing me with something that is unfamiliar to them can say, where you get that from? What is that about? And you get that instantaneous chance to minister. And to some extent, I feel sad to know that we as Seventh-day Adventists don't wear the mantle of being the peculiar people bright enough for others to see the good works that God has done for us, that other people may be blessed. And I'm not a gambler, but I can tell anybody, if you want to bet on God.
If you're going to gamble on God.
Gamble with God.
Stake your bet on him.
Because if he said that he will open the windows of heaven, he's more than willing to open a place you've never seen and bless you beyond your wildest dreams if you just humble yourself and ask.
All righty. Now I have to be fair to the men in the tech room, but Wayne, as we wrap for this evening, we're talking about, we started last week and we look at the King's Meet and stuff. We're talking about, as Sean mentioned something earlier, about trauma response. And I have discovered that even, I was at a function in Kingston on Wednesday with the Police Civilian Oversight Authority. And we had a professor from overseas. And she tickled my mind by saying that you put a young police officer in an area that is fraught with criminals. She's talking about trauma response. It becomes, so he knows what he's going into. He develops a defense mechanism. He has the law on his side. Now here's a youth coming. He sees the policeman. He knows he's living in a community that is looked down on. He is developing a response. He knows what trauma is in his area. He knows what it is to be looked down on and be wrongfully treated because of where he lives and the community he's from. The police officer was fired at in a similar community. So this issue of trauma response is affecting both sides. Now, how do we relate to the average Caribbean man or American man that he has had a traumatic situation and he is faced with issues? Now, for most men, their response is either attack first or boy, I was ill-treated or I was defrauded, so me no make that happen to me again. And the tendency is to go in the wrong direction, to exploit or to overcharge, or to make sure that they robbed you on the last job. So you're going make it up on the one that you have now. The person who is paying must pay the price. We're talking about trauma response that creates trauma on others. It's men on Mondays.
Well, I was told that the best way to defend is to attack, right? Because when you attack, then there is no need to defend again because the threat would have been eliminated. All right, so here, and I'm not saying attack anybody. I'm saying the best way to defend in a conversation is to attack in the conversation. All right, so here is the trauma issue with men in our Caribbean setting and specifically in Jamaica. We really, genuinely, most of us had a hard upbringing. Most of us. And even the ones who grew protected just by being boys, it is difficult. It's a very rough space and people handle you hard. Person say, yeah boy, get up and nothing if you drop. No ball, yeah boy. No worry about the cut bleeding. No worry about that. You're a boy. And so most of us grew up tough. We grew up tough. And so when you have gotten to a particular age, you would have heard it so many times.
You start living it.
You're tough in a real life. You're tough. And so And so the expectation now to be vulnerable and to expose those traumatic triggers become lesser and lesser. The sensory nurture that would cause you to want to expose yourself to be vulnerable decreases. And so the idea of a man going to council, go sit down for an hour every day if he tries, so it is counter masculinity.
And sometimes it takes a crisis to bring him to a point where him recognize that he need the counseling.
It takes a Christ.
We're going to stop right there. It takes a Christ. That is, boy, I can't even extend the time because now we're going long past our time. But we're going to pick it up. We're going to have to pick it up next week because I need to release the men in the media room, and I need to release the producer to go home. But we're talking about real life issues, and we're going to ask you to join us next week because we're moving from God take my life to God using your life, and you're benefiting from the trauma. You are ministering from a broken place. You are in a stronger place. They say, is it Vern Jackson, the song that says, they said once a bird has a broken wing, it can never fly high again. The song says, I'm flying higher than I've ever been. So if you're watching, I know you are tuned in, and we'll pick it up next week. But it doesn't mean you can't fly higher because you have had a broken wing. It doesn't mean you can't run because you've had a broken foot. It means that you are more sympathetic towards the person, and you're better able to minister to traumatic situations because out of your own pain, you minister to others in their pain. And I'm going to ask Sean.
I may take 30 seconds. One of the things we need to recognize is that everyone has failures and everyone have experienced difficulties. And most people who become thoroughly furnished or stronger, as we deem them to be, is because of life experiences. And those experiences are not always soft.
Thank you. Good point of which saying everyone has failure, and I'll just add one line to that. Failure is not final. We'll pick it up next week with the Father. Wayne's last second says, failure is not final with the Father. And we'll pick it up because the world wants to measure you by your scars. God wants to measure you by his scars. And because of his scars, you can rise above your scars. Sean, the closing prayer is yours.
Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us another opportunity to be vulnerable and be honest with you and with others looking for a message in honesty, in forgiveness, in letting go, in being pleasured by your mercy. I ask you now for all those who are viewing, all who have been hearing about our conversation, let them know that everything that we speak is just a simple testimony of your goodness. It's nothing that we've done. And because of all of this, we ask you, Lord, to shine, give your people a second chance. Yes. An opportunity of change and of compassion and of progress, that when they reach that milestone, they will be astonished at what you've done. I thank you once more for carrying us here, and I ask your journeying mercies home. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us. And I want to say, if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, type it in the chat. We will look for it. It's Men on Mondays. It is the unrehearsed, practical conversation as we talk about issues, I just say from boys to men, or from men to boys. We'll see you next week. We go out with music. Thank you for joining and keeping our company. We'll see you next week, Monday at 7 o'clock. God bless you.